Hey everybody, Angee here, and I am super excited to tell you about a new book that's come to 846, and more importantly, the author behind that book. The book is called Everyone is a Consultant: How to Build a Business Relationship That's Personal. And if you are anything like me, you know that especially as a woman, that we're always trying to walk that line. We're always trying to make those connections with our clients and our customers and still establish ourselves as an authority and build a strong business relationship. And I am stating this for the world to hear. I don't know of a better book. If it's out there, I have not read it. And I've read a lot that's better than this book. Everyone is a consultant. So I'm honored to have been involved in the editing and the publishing of this book. But the woman who is really the source of all of this is with us, Dr. Dorothy Leone. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you so much for that amazing introduction. I am blushing here, and thank you.
Well, we had a wonderful, wonderful time working on this book. It was such a powerful experience for me. And everything you say about this book is so very true about this whole process that you outline in the book, because you actually, um, the working relationship that we built as a result of working on this book was literally ideal. It was a beautiful, beautiful working relationship for me. I hope it was the same for you. But I certainly learned a lot as a result of working on this book. So just give the listeners today and the viewers today kind of a synopsis of, first of all, how you got into consulting yourself, because the book talks about how everyone is a consultant, which is kind of tongue in cheek. We'll talk about that in a minute. But how did you become a consultant?
Sure. So my story is that I'm a speech language pathologist who started to do some coaching work in different school districts and found myself having to communicate with lots of different individuals and really start to think about how I'm building rapport and relationship with different people in different schools and then eventually different business models. So my story goes that I started building little by little and realized that without that relationship, my building blocks were really shaky. And that foundation of relationship was so important for all of the clients whom I were really starting to layer my work on, if you will. For me, the story goes that I am therapist turned coach and consultant. And I think that some of the therapy side of my brain comes into the book a little bit, and you definitely feel the concept of relationship building, concept of communication as some under pillars, if you will, of some of the strategy that's discussed in the book.
What's really great about the book, I think, is that it came to you as a result of other people saying to you how stellar the coaching relationship was between you and them, and that they'd had other consultants, but no one really did it you like you do it. And how did you come to know these practices so that you were able to share them in a book?
Sure. I'm blushing a little bit here, but there was definitely a compliment road, if you will, that started to boost my own confidence in my ability to communicate with others and really provide some support services to other individuals. So when I started noticing this pattern of, one person saying, "Oh, wow, it's really interesting how you took that approach to our conversation," even if it was potentially a sensitive conversation, right? You're not, as a consultant, we all know you're not always delivering positive news to your client. And you have to really work through that and make sure that you're supporting the client in receiving that potentially delicate information. So as I started to realize that maybe the way I was delivering information was important, I then thought, okay, well, if it's the methodology of how I'm delivering it, my words must also be really important, which is another strategy you really see in the book. And that's definitely highlighted in conversations I've had with people, that to be quite mindful, if you will, of the words that you choose to share with individuals and how you choose to share that message.
Yeah. You talk a lot about distraction habits, and that's probably one of my favorite parts of the book because I think we all think we're great communicators. I mean, very few people would self-identify as a bad consultant or a bad manager or a bad coach or what have you. We all think we're getting our message across. I mean, that's the world of writing, right? I know there are authors out there who we always assume that what's in our brain is translating on the page. But in your case, when you're face to face with clients or at a boardroom or meeting with educators or what have you, it's so important that what you're saying is coming through, and yet probably more often than not, it's not coming through. People are not communicating as well as they can. And this is what I always think about this whenever I think about this book is how people can truly take in the information that you're sharing with them when they think they're okay, when they think they're doing well. And I think there's a part in the book where you talk a little bit about ways to tell if you really aren't as great a communicator as perhaps you think you are. Could you share one or two of those with us?
Sure, sure. So, in vogue right now is to talk about mindfulness practices and talking about being present in the moment. And I think you really nailed it when you said I think a lot of us feel we're really good at that, right? Like, yes, I am present in the moment. I'm here, right? And then all of a sudden that smartwatch goes off and oh, okay, my eyes tripped away a little bit and then came back. And that's a really important piece of the book, that just are you really present, right? Is your brain really thinking about the present moment? So, for example, so many of us will be listening and engaged in active listening, right? Our head is shaking, we're engaged, we're using facial expression and body language that says we're engaged, but perhaps we've already even formulated a response to the individual we're communicating with before our communicative partner has finished talking. So we've almost like pre-figured out what we're going to say. And that's not active listening, right? Active listening is where you're listening to the entire response. You're not necessarily meeting that person with evaluation, if you will, or preemptive thinking about what you think that person is saying or what you think that person is going to say. So being present, right, and being a really good communicator has to do with listening to the entire communicated message, and really being almost respectful, if you will, of how important that message is that you're receiving from your client.
I wonder how we get there because of the list of distraction habits that you share, that was the one I think I was most guilty of. Trying to be prepared with an answer. And I don't know how we get to that place. Is that a lack of confidence in our ability? Um, or is that just poor communication habits that build up over time? Because I think that when I'm talking to clients, I'm always wanting to be sure that I have the answer that they're asking me for, and teaching your brain to not move so far ahead of the conversation and stay right there where you are and formulate your answer when they're done speaking. That pause always worried me. I always thought if I pause to formulate my answer, they're going to think I don't know the answer. And so I realized that I got into that habit of preparing my response in advance. Do you have a sense of what that's rooted in?
Sure. So I think that technology and this concept of everything is at our fingertips, right? Like we go onto Amazon and we want the 4 to 12 hour shipping, right? We don't want to wait two
That's right.
days before that item comes to our front door. So it's the same with communication. We tend to send a text message, and if that response doesn't come right away, our patience is really just not present because we're really quite used to instant gratification. However, the human brain doesn't work that way. The human brain requires processing time, right? And there's something really healthy about a quiet space before a response is generated. If anything, that quiet space really shows that the communication partner is thinking through what is the most important aspect, right? I want to be really mindful and careful with the words I'm choosing. So I'm going to create a pause structure so that then I can respond in the most meaningful way. I think the other piece that sometimes happens is that we expect ourselves as a coach or consultant to always have an answer. And I don't think, I think that's unrealistic to go into a coaching relationship saying, okay, I always have the answer for my client. In the book, we talk about this concept of like a facade versus real communication and how
Mhm.
genuine something as simple as a compliment has to be for a client. I think that the same goes for the response, the content of the response when we're speaking with a client, right? So if we are unsure of maybe if the client should turn right or should turn left, should the client focus on more exercise or healthier eating habits, right? Well, maybe we don't need to come up with that conclusion just yet. Maybe we have to travel down the communication journey a little bit more, do some more investigating with the client, spend more time together, and then eventually come up with that conclusion. Potentially, that answer could be formulated between coach and client together, not just with the answer coming directly from the consultant or coach.
That reminds me of a really, really just exciting part of the book where you talk about the sameness of a particular client and the differences between a particular client. I think you phrase it as I've heard that before. I've faced this, I've dealt that before. And as a consultant, if you are a health consultant or a business consultant or what have you, you are working in a genre, you're working in a particular industry. And so much of that is going to be the same. And yet you identify that even if it's the same kind of company and they're facing the same kind of issues, what gave rise to those issues could be different.
Yes, yes. In pediatric behavioral therapy, we talk about something called an iceberg, right? It's a silly analogy, but we say that what we see on top of the iceberg may be the same for different clients. So the outward behavior, right? The person is gaining weight, the person is losing money in their business, the person is selling their employees short, right? So maybe that is consistent, what we physically see above the iceberg. But what's below the iceberg is much deeper. It's very dense. It's actually larger than what you see above the waterline, right? And below that iceberg can be so many different antecedents, if you will, for why the behavior is presenting itself. It is the same exact thing with our clients, right? Just because I have quote unquote heard that story before, one, I wouldn't really want to tell my client that I had heard that story before because it doesn't really feel that good to hear those words, right? But the second thing is to really think about, well, the antecedent, what's under the iceberg, if you will, could be vastly different. And I do think that as a coach, we of course learn from our prior experiences and we bring that knowledge with us from case to case or client to client. But we do have to treat every client with a very unique lens. And that's where that active listening component really comes in, where you have to really gauge in on that active listening and make sure that you are hearing every single part of that client's story so that you can ultimately build that really healthy relationship with them.
Yeah, it's so great. That's so great. So, in a moment, I'm going to ask you to share how people can get in touch with you. But before we get to that, um, I have found as I'm reading over the book, and by the way, the book is chock full, not just of information, but at the back of every chapter, there are exercises that allow people to go deeper into the conversation or into the understanding of what it really means to build this deeply personal relationship in a business environment. But what I want to ask you is, I know this book is obviously for consultants, and all kinds of consultants. I think you listed them in your introduction. There were clown consultants and smile or scent perfume like scent consultants and everything you can imagine. Consulting has grown, particularly since COVID. It has really, really grown as an industry, which is fantastic. Is there anyone who could benefit from this book? Perhaps who is not a consultant? Is there an application for this book outside of that world?
I think that people who have relationships with clients, with employees, so for example, an employer and an employee, there's lots of what we're talking about in this dynamic of communication, relationship building, active listening, thinking about small tasks versus the big mountain, right? All of those are really important foundational skills to have when you're interacting with other individuals. I think that it really plays a part in that employee employer category. I've had a lot of reviews of the book so far, talking to employers and saying how so many of the facets of those exercises of thinking and reflecting on who they are as an employee, as an employer, as a communicator, as a person who's trying to build relationship with their employee, that it's really, really a helpful and healthy exercise, if you will, particularly as employers are thinking about maybe like a performance indicator for their employee, right? That goes both ways there, right? How are you as an employer helping your employee get to that point of growth, right? And what kind of strategy are you using? In a way, it's not very different from the coach client or consultant client relationship.
That's so smart. And you'll be happy to know that when my children come into my office to talk to me, I take my phone, I turn it over, and I set it down. And I learned that from you. And that they noticed. They immediately noticed. I mean, teenagers who hardly notice anything that isn't flashing and making lots of noise. They notice that they get my full attention. The laptop screen comes down and the phone gets turned over, because that is one of those ways that you can say to someone, what you're saying to me matters. It's important. I'm listening. I'm engaged. I want to hear everything you have to say. And boy, doesn't everyone in the world need to hear that, whether it's husband, wife, parent, child, employee, employer, or coach consultant. So, how can people reach you if they want to book you or if they want to have you come and speak in their industries?
Sure. So email is probably the best way to get in touch with me. That would be the most direct way. I also am on Instagram if anyone wants to follow. Those are probably the two best ways to build a relationship, if you will, and start that communication trend. I'm really excited to share this work with others, and really start to build out some communication around interpersonal relationship, right? As you just highlighted, that human connection is quite important these days, and it's missing in some of our key relationships that we're building.
Well, we're going to have obviously the book on the screen. You should see Dr. Leone's email and social media. Connect with her. I promise you, you have my personal guarantee that you are going to be both challenged and changed by the way that she impacts you as a person and your organization. And what you need in what I think the consulting world needs, the business world needs, the corporate world needs is more of this connection, that we do become very automaton like. We do become, we say the words, and we don't necessarily feel the feelings. We don't necessarily think about how those words are impacting others. And we're not really hearing each other anymore in the world. And so this is a great moment to make a turn in your organization by getting this book. Everyone is a consultant. It's available everywhere. You can buy it everywhere in every form. So if you like ebook, if you like audiobook, if you're like me and you want that physical copy in your hand, grab your copy, and all the links to how you can buy it are in the show notes. So thank you so much. I appreciate you taking time to chat with me, Dr. Leone, and thank you for this amazing book and for such a fantastic experience.
Thank you. This was such a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Bye, everybody. See you next time.